Hey, so yesterday you met John. John, right? If you watched the part 3 yesterday, you met John. John was a pretty stressed out guy, right? He was like the foreman of a construction site. And, um, you know, uh, John will have a heart attack. Spoiler alert. But he hasn't had one yet. But in yesterday's episode, they started setting things up. Let's see if you caught all of these things.
All right. Hey now.
Mr. Kovacs Class. It's Mr. Kovacs Class.
You might learn a ton.
It's Mr. Kovacs Class.
It's interesting too.
It's Mr. Kovacs Class.
And he's super cool.
It's Mr. Kovacs Class.
Yeah, so in yesterday's episode, there's John, right? He's on the job site, and he keeps getting calls from his boss, and that's stressing him out. We know that stress is really, it puts a strain on the heart. Stress can cause the heart to be harder than it needs to, okay? What else about John? I don't know if you noticed, but John also was a little bit overweight, okay? And yeah, that in terms of the heart, what's weird about things is when you grow to be an adult, your heart grows with you. But once you're an adult, your heart stops growing, even if you continue to grow. And in the case of John, he's overweight. He's got more mass, and that mass all needs blood, and that blood needs to be delivered by a heart that's not getting any bigger. You know what I mean? So that same little heart that he has got to push blood farther. What else about John? He's not very active. You'll see this in a little bit too in today's episode, but he's not real active. And one of the nice things about being active is getting that heart to squeeze often can make the heart stronger. In fact, our lab, we're trying to figure out one of the things we're trying to figure out is what is the ultimate, what's the kind of the magic amount that your heart has to squeeze faster than normal to make it actually stronger, right? And then also, if blood squeezes stronger and faster, it'll stretch out arteries, which is kind of like, if you ever try to blow up a balloon and before you blow it up, you give it a little stretcheroo just to make sure it's more elastic and then blow up the balloon. That works for arteries too. We want to keep them stretchy. Once arteries start to stiffen up, it's harder for blood to go through them. And another thing he's 45 years old, right? He's almost 4 times older than you guys. He's almost as old as old Mr. Kovac. Age is a factor because, first of all, the heart's been, you only get one of them, right? And it's been pumping now. For him, it's 45 years. And even his arteries, there's, buildup of imperfections, and there's buildup of maybe plaques and things over the years. So the older you get, the greater, the harder it is for your heart to work. It's kind of weird, but it makes sense. He's male, but both boys and girls are equally likely to have heart problems. It just seems to be for males here in the United States, they tend to happen earlier in your life than for women. I don't really know why, but that's what the data says. A couple other things. Did you notice his choice of lunch? His cheeseburger or whatever, greasy cheeseburger, that I think was a setup that was set up to make it appear like that's what he normally kind of eats. He does have a great, so he's got food going into his body, which contains, really in terms of heart health, the two things we worry about are cholesterol, right, which is like a steroid hormone, cholesterol, and saturated fats. Saturated fats are the fats that stay solid at room temperature. So like butter is a saturated fat, whereas like olive oil is an unsaturated fat. And we know that that these things can often build up on the inside of blood vessels, effectively making them smaller. And then the other thing, I don't know if you noticed, but John is a smoker, right? And so my guess is if he's like a typical smoker, he didn't start yesterday. He started when he was in middle school or high school, like a teenager. That's when people start, you know? And unfortunately, one of the things that makes cigarette smoking so addictive is a chemical called nicotine. And nicotine, what it does is it actually, a dose of nicotine will cause your blood vessels to squinch like that. Squinch down, right? And so that winds up reducing the flow of blood to certain parts of your brain. When you start smoking, after you've been smoking for a while, actually this works for dip or chewing tobacco. It's the same. Nicotine is the chemical that's addictive. You get so used to the smallness, the squinching down of your blood vessels in your brain, that when the dose wears off and they swell back up, it can be actually physically painful, and you are addicted to the chemical. The nicotine is not the chemical that usually affects lungs in smokers. We'll talk about those later. But nicotine does squinch down your blood vessels. And so you can imagine a squinched down blood vessel is harder to push blood through. So like if you look at John, he's like the perfect storm of heart disease, like of risk factors for heart attack, right? He's 45-year-old male. He's overweight. He eats lousy food. He's not very active. He's a smoker. I mean, all those things that you know are bad, not great for your health. And so it's probably not a surprise. Now, one of the things that people often do, you know, they call heart disease the silent killer because the symptoms, you usually don't know. I mean, there aren't really any symptoms until something really bad happens. So one of the ways they check the quality of your heart is not just your pulse, but also how hard is blood pushing against the arteries. And so that's why when you go to the doctor or the nurse, they always take your blood pressure. And when they take your blood pressure, they use a machine called a sphygmomanometer. And that's going to be the word of the day, sphygmomanometer.